Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to have you with us to participate and share in the first webinar pre-event of Share Ljubljana 2020. Our host today will be architect Miloš Kosec, landscape designer and member of the editorial board of Outsider magazine, architect Andrea Roibomovila, publisher of Share Architects, and Florin Mindirigiu, the founder of Share Architects.
Hello to everyone. I'm really glad to be able to greet you all in our Ljubljana webinar, where we'll be finding out how architecture can change the world. And as a matter of fact, we can see that architecture is changing our everyday worlds as we speak. We're all at home or in our offices enclosed, and we're able to communicate through World Wide Web. And with this in mind, I'm really delighted to be able to introduce some great speakers alongside with us that we will also meet at the Share Forum on the 9th of July in Ljubljana. So we'll start this webinar with a series of exciting presentations, followed by a debate, and we will end today's event with a sequence of questions from the audience, that is you. So we invite the participants to submit their questions to the speakers in the Q&A button as follows. Your Q&A button is below at the bottom of the screen. So, and if you use it and you type what you would like to ask any or all of the participants, first type video followed by the question if you would like to address the question live. But type moderator followed by your question if you would like the moderators, that is me or Andrea, if you would like us to pose the question for you. So I propose that we move to the first part of today's event. I would like to introduce Mr. Pepe Gascon. He is the principal and lead architect of Pepe Gascon Arquitectura in Spain. His work has been awarded with many international prizes, while being constantly covered also by numerous publications and specialized websites, among which are the Europe 40 Under 40 Award, the International Architecture Award, the International Design Award. He was shortlisted in the LEAF Awards and shortlisted in the FAD Awards, among many others. Pepe will present a presentation or his thoughts with intriguing title, "We Won't Get Back to Normal," because normal was the problem. And I, for one, am very much looking forward to hearing more about that. So, Pepe, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Of course, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. When I started to think about this presentation, of course, we are now in a really exceptional times, and I thought that I felt that there is no sense to talk about my projects because of this exception time. So I will share with you some thoughts and some ideas that I had during my lockdown, and also some examples of architecture that I think that can benefit persons. Okay, Australia under wildfires. This is how 2020 started. Okay, climate change, truth turned into flames. Unfortunately, we are used to see how natural disasters happen year by year. But this year, we had a new surprise, which shake overall our lives, the COVID-19 pandemic. We all wonder how COVID-19 will change our lives, our habits, and if we will return to normalcy. But what is normalcy? What does it mean? Last days, a picture has been circulating showing a projection, showing a facade of an apartment block in Santiago, Chile. Reading in Spanish, no volveremos a la normalidad porque la normalidad era el problema. Translated into English, we won't get back to normal because normal was the problem. This sentence was in relationship with the Chilean protest during last year and at the beginning of this year as well. but get also sense with another context, that it's the COVID-19. So the COVID-19 recovery offers an opportunity for us to change our normalcy, setting the world on a more sustainable and equal path. And this reaction, of course, should be a global one. But we will come back shortly to this concept. Sorry. First, I would like to focus on the people, which is the aim and the reason for which exists architecture. It seems reasonable to think that this period of confinement is going to repeat itself, and possibly the way of thinking and creating domestic spaces could change. So what's up with the houses and the domestic spaces? A part of well-lighted, energy efficient and comfortable houses, we should be able to incorporate in our homes terminologies as flexibility, transformability, and versatility. Working areas, fitness areas, family areas, playground areas, 1,000 houses in only one house. But these days, especially in an urban context, what should we be a must is the window, the balcony, the terrace, those intermediate spaces acting as you are outside while remaining inside, decompression areas. Our interiors must be as much exterior as possible. The architecture should also provide our houses of community meeting spaces, spaces to be in touch with our neighbors and to socialize with them. This residential building has been built as a cooperative between its co-owners and the municipality of Barcelona, which was originally the owner of the plot. I think it's an intelligent way to build social housing in our cities. The owners, of course, took active part during the project and decided to not build more space inside their private apartments in benefit of the common areas, socialized areas, meeting areas, taking profit of the roof, etc. We are living our lives on a hurry without time to interact with our neighbors. Maybe architecture should provoke that. In this case, there is no speculation. And that's why the project also has focused on common and meeting areas. But what's up with the city? More than half of the world population live in an urban context. How we could improve our cities with the aim to benefit the life of their inhabitants during a lockdown period. This is a very interesting project which transformed these buildings into beautiful dwellings with qualities and comfort. The addition of winter gardens and balconies in the extension of the existing building gives more space to enjoy, more natural light, more mobility of use and more views. This project set an example of a relevant and economic transformation that produces generous, pleasant, and performing dwellings, better conditions of living, of comfort, and of pleasure. According to the Paris Agreement 2015, municipalities of more than 50,000 inhabitants must implement low emission areas in proportion with the number of inhabitants and its surface. These low emission areas should result in a 50% car traffic reduction. I want to introduce you a project that Barcelona municipality started 2 years ago, the Super Block model. Super blocks are made up of a grid of basic roads forming a polygon, some 400 by 400 meters, taking in the inner space 9 blocks of the Barcelona's grid extension. The interior is closed to car traffic and above ground parking, and gives preference to pedestrian in the public space, where green areas take protagonism. The super block is emerging as an integral solution to the use of public space, mixing urban planning with mobility and limiting the presence of private vehicles in order to return the public space to the citizens. Superblock improves urban quality while reducing the environmental impacts of vehicles. It increases the quality of life of residents and improves social cohesion and economic activity. But I'm going to finalize with a final consideration. We are destroying our planet, and this is our real problem and our threat. And of course, our responsibility to reverse the situation. We see with perplexity how our governments are not able to reach an agreement regarding the climate change. We must rethink our mobility models. We must decide how should be our planet appropriation. Before COVID-19 appeared, this situation was understood as a normalcy state. But again, what is normalcy? Humanity must consider about this question. And I will show you now my last picture. Vogue Italia has run a blank cover for April 2020 issue. We must start writing again, rewrite a new world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pepe Gascon, for sharing your thoughts with us. Well, now it is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. and Mrs. Kerem&Begum Yazgan, the founding partners of Yazgan Design Architecture from Turkey. Yazgan Design Architecture is an architectural interior and landscape and graphic design and construction firm based in Ankara. With an experienced staff of 45 architects, landscape designers, technical draftsmen, and IT experts, the company has signed on many architectural, interior design, and landscape projects. In the past 16 years, Yazgan Design Architecture has been published in 19 countries and has awarded 89 national and international design awards, with over 8 million square meters in total projects located in both Turkey and in many other countries. The portfolio of Yazgan Design Architecture continues to grow and diversify. Welcome our guest who will deliver a short presentation entitled very symptomatically, Symptoms of New Space.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kerem Yazgan and my colleague Begum Yazgan. We want to talk about the paradox of architecture in post-pandemic era. Topic is paradox of architecture. And as an old shaman is saying, according to an old shaman is saying, nothing in nature lives for itself. Trees don't eat their own fruit, and living for others is the rule of nature. The paradox of nature, according to us, is the paradox in between the cooperation and isolation. Cooperation while isolation. The living organism has to learn how to live with all the elements of nature while protecting its existence. Like a shark. A shark's skin is covered with teeth-like scales to protect the shark from outside condition. Also, during hundreds of years, this skin is developed and it helps for the shark to move faster and more quietly. But also there is a cooperation with some of the other fish like remora fish. So the protection plus cooperation goes together. What about architecture in the pandemic era? There is also a paradox of architecture similar to this natural existence. Cooperation with nature while isolation. Architecture has to learn the ways of living with the forces of nature while helping to sustain human existence. And one of the forces of nature, as an example, we can give this Spanish flu 100 years ago. At that time, a quarter of the world's population unfortunately died. And a need for temporary spaces occurred at that time for hospitals, to transform spaces to hospitals. Like these pictures that we see also today. And 100 years later, today we face with COVID-19. And when the space capacity exceeds, we need extra spaces, as all you know. So we try to collect different functions that today is transformed into a hospital. And we collected 28 different functions from all over the world. Such as airport sites, badminton centers, college campuses, different types of functions like convention centers, they are now all are transforming. And each day the list is increasing in different parts of the world with different functions. Like dormitories, 600 beds are provided in this dormitory. Event centers, exhibition centers, fairs, all of the specific functions are now transforming to hospitals, temporary hospitals, they say. Field hospitals, hotels, offices, parks, garage, parking lots, even ships. They are transformed to hospitals, shipping containers, shopping centers, soccer fields, sports halls, stadiums, tennis courts, even trains, transit hubs, warehouses. So in architecture for 100 years, we see that adaptive reuse seems still the only way to sustain human existence. And now at that point, I'd like to give the word to my colleague, Begum.
Architecture's occupation with space configuration and function while neglecting the environmental factors was highlighted by Herzog de Meuron. They exemplified Mies van der Rohe's famous Farnsworth house, which was subject to floods, periodical floods, after it is built. Like that. About our ways of integration of nature, our ways of considering nature, I will exemplify two projects of our company. One of them is located in Middle East Technical University. It's a co-working and cafeteria building. We designed the spaces through using nature's elements and the skylights, greenhouses, and became the walls that divide the spaces for the different functions of the building. So we designed by using greenhouses, skylights, and courtyards. Nature helps in the while spatial configuration. At the same time, they help to cast shadows to the building and provide a relaxing atmosphere for the students. And I will exemplify our showroom building. It's located in Ankara. It's an office building that also developed by using the courtyards. And these courtyards act as walls that divide the spaces. Tabii ki bir dakika kaldı falan diyeceğim. Tamam.
Devam.
Tamam. Yani. O zaman geçmiyorum bunları böyle çat tamam mı? Yani böyle shadow'lar bilmem. Here, it's the picture show that the courtyard acts as the integration, how we integrate nature into the buildings by understanding the environmental factors. But as the next slides shows, we have we have to take control of our screen, I suppose. Ama açılmıyor bu şekilde. Bu şekilde açılmıyor.
Sorry, it doesn't work well.
In fact, we have to take control of our own screen because we cannot move in any way. So we have a real, connection problem, maybe as we are far from here. I don't know. The screen, how can I say?
Okay, maybe it's better to come back to your presentation, Begum. Okay. If it's not working, we'll come back after, and I will ask the moderator to take the control, please.
Okay.
Okay, so so thank you for your presentation. Probably we'll come back to finish it if the technical problems will be solved. And also for sharing your thoughts with us. For sure, health care facilities should find a way to properly address the future of humankind. And this pause we are all sharing could be a good turning point for reconsidering this matter. So my colleague will introduce the next guest speaker, and probably meantime, we will solve the technical problem.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion as well with Kerem&Begum Yazgan. But now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Sven THORISSEN, who is a director at MVRDV, the Netherlands. And his professional career covers architectural design, project development, and sustainability. Previously, Mr. THORISSEN worked for MVRDV as project leader on projects including Unterföhring Park Village, the Frøsilos in Copenhagen, Buurt 9 in Amsterdam, and the Market Hall in Rotterdam. For MVRDV, he currently oversees the studio for projects in German-speaking countries. Besides his work for MVRDV, he has acted as visiting critic at the Rotterdam Academy of Architecture, the ENSA Belleville, Paris, and the University of Applied Sciences in Leiden. So I asked Mr. Sven THORISSEN to present us his talk that's entitled Towards a Resilient Urbanism. Sven, please.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation. Let's see how I get the control over this screen. I'm there, I guess. Towards a resilient urbanism. Well, I'm a bit afraid that Pepe did my presentation a bit before me. So let's see. First of all, I would like to offer our commiserations to those who lost loved ones or suffer from the ramifications of this pandemic. It's clear that the academic discussion that we're having about the consequences for our profession should in no way be seen in the light of downplaying or neglecting the personal or societal tragedies that shatter people's lives all over the world. But the impact of the COVID dynamic is harsh. We're experiencing exceptional situation in which we find ourselves confronted with ever more frightening numbers each day. It has caused over 130,000 deaths, put the majority of countries in a lockdown and the global economy to a grinding halt. So, but if you compare a series of world maps, there's a interesting correlation between the rate of infections, the state of industrialization, and the quality of our living environments, which should be the prime subject on the agenda of our world leaders, I guess. Especially those in the rich and highly developed countries. But comparing the annual casualties due to air pollution to the ones of the COVID-19 virus makes you think which one of those poses the greater threat to humanity. Quite obviously, it's a man-made catastrophe that's quietly taking place. The strict measures taken by governments to contain infections and prevent the virus from spreading even more shows direct results on our environment. Air pollution is diminished by more than 60% in China. And in northern Italy, the stars are visible at night above car-centric metropoles like Los Angeles. Indians are able to see the Himalaya and from a large distance, and people in Venice realize that there's actually marine life in their canals. Unfortunately, these images only show temporary and local improvement and do not affect the larger issue of climate change due to our human economic activities. So to stress a phrase that was often heard in the past weeks, there's another curve that definitely needs to be flattened. And the current situation shows that we as people, as humans, as architects and urban designers, do play a very strong role in this. Certainly as architects and urbanists, we need to be aware of our responsibility. Since building industry is responsible for almost 40% of the CO2 emissions, which confronts us with a massive challenge for the years to come. So if we want to get to the Paris climate goals, we have to work very hard to reach those in the next 10 to 15 years. So let this situation be a wake-up call and grab the opportunity to radically rethink the way we organize and design our built environment. So like Winston Churchill said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So what can architecture do? Of course, architecture can provide first response temporary solutions for urgent needs for emergency shelter or healthcare institutions. We've seen this image before. Suddenly it becomes apparent that we can build a whole hospital within 10 days to cure more than 1,000 patients. Next to this, there's a chance and a necessity to redefine the characteristics of the places that we live and work and play, and all the possible combinations in these. So as we see ourselves confronted with a lockdown, also in the Netherlands, the whole office since a month is working from home, and apparently it works fine. But we, of course, we do lack the social contact. Architects will find themselves facing stricter regulations and limitations due to the crisis, which will all demand a great deal of creativity and thinking outside of the box in order to translate these limitations into fascinating architecture. Just show an example from our early work in which the height limitation of the building was forcing us to reach the total number of 103 apartments by hanging them on the facades. That means like try to make something positive out of the limitations and use these as a creativity input. We should also, with the negative effects of globalization, focus on the creation of spatial possibilities for local production and strengthening local communities. The presence and availability of private outdoor space, as Pepe also mentioned, in dense urban environment is proving to be of great value in times of social confinement. The possibility to enjoy the first warm rays of sun, to step outside and take a deep breath of air, and to have a conversation with your neighbors keeping a safe distance is a merit, the value of which is becoming very apparent in times like these. And next to the obvious elements of architecture, I'd like to focus on the much larger and much more potent possibilities for design on an urban or regional scale to meet the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. One thing we should definitely put a lot of effort in is the creation of an inclusive society. Large groups of the population do not have the luxury, like we do, to work from home. Those are the ones that work in manufacturing or service industry with low wages, and they are deprived of insurance or healthcare that could provide a safety net in when businesses grind to a halt. This is one reason why the death toll is significantly larger among Americans with an Afro-American or a Hispanic background, or leads to the chaotic situation seen in India when thousands of day workers leaving the cities to go back to the countryside, to their families, to provide a living. Interestingly, the notion of the modern city as an answer to the pandemics in overcrowded and unhygienic city life of the 19th century has led to the spatial separation of work, life, and play, leading to the necessity to travel long distances between these nodes of daily life. What seems to be part of the problem, namely the density of urban large cities, might be a path to a solution. The concept of the 50-minute city with all amenities within 50-minute cycling distance leads to a decentralized organization of those key elements of urban life. Densification, as you can see here, Paris, du 4 heures, everything that you would want and would need in your daily life is reachable within a 50-minute walking or cycling distance. Also, we did a study on Grand Paris, which is more ambitious and more responsible. It was a great study to densify the population of Paris. and by bringing a lot of people closer to the humanities, and thus avoiding to have long travel distances in overcrowded public transport, etc. We did the same for Oslo a couple of years ago, in which we showed that 500,000 people could be added to the population of Oslo without touching the beautiful countryside around it, just by densifying the nodes of public transport. One of the examples that was realized is the Bjørvika master plan right in front of the central station, which saves 6,500 car journeys a day, or 3,200 tons of CO2 emissions a year. In our own, sorry, go back one. In our own neighborhoods in Rotterdam, we initiated the mobility challenge, in which car owners of the neighborhood were offered free parking in a nearby facility in exchange for a free ticket to public transport or a e-bike. What we did do with the vacant parking lots was to fill them, inhabit them, like you can see here on that little image, with mini parks and gardens and playgrounds, which had huge impact on the quality of public life and the awareness of the necessity of a good and green outdoor space in your direct living environment. Especially in the times in which keeping social distance is obligatory and the quality of our direct living environment is key to psychological and physical well-being of the people. One last thing that I would like to emphasize is the fact that we see ourselves under severe measures by our governments. There's a lot of measures being taken, also taking care of our privacy, or threatening our privacy actually, in order to confine the pandemic. We should be very careful that these measurements are only temporary, and that we hold our governments responsible for taking care of privacy and safety in our cities. And we as individuals also have this responsibility to take care of them. That was my take on it. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much for your inspiring presentation. Probably we'll go back to Mr. and Mrs. Kerem&Begum Yazgan and hope meantime our colleagues have solved the problem. So we are looking forward to hear the conclusion of their presentation, Symptoms of New Space. Let's see.
Because we have a little bit time, I want to say hello to all the participants here today from the organizers of SHARE conference. I want to say that it's the first time in our 20 years of work when we are not meeting in person. We stay in online. Is our second experience after Bucharest in this case. And we hope today will be nice and will be very inspiring for the architects. In this time, now we are more than 160 participants here in this webinar, and I'm sure that will be a success for today. Thank you.
So we were talking about how architecture's occupation with space configuration and function, transparency and aesthetic matters, while neglecting the environmental factors was highlighted by Herzog de Meuron, while exemplifying Mies van der Rohe's building, which was subject to periodical floods after it is built. And I was mentioning about our ways of integration, our ways of considering nature while in our architectural practices. I'm coming to it's our second project that I exemplified, and we use courtyards and green spaces for dividing the functions inside the building.
Andrea, can you go on, please?
Can you shift the slide for us, because it doesn't work? So when we say next, can you do that for us?
Yes, our colleagues will do that for you.
Okay, here what I mean by the courtyards dividing spaces, I'm giving this slide as an example. Next, please. Next, please. And now we need a radical shift with these experiences from understanding the effect of nature inside of spaces from the knowledge of to the knowledge of nature. Next, please. We ask certain questions in this manner. Do architects produce design by focusing on the knowledge of nature that is inherent in its system of relations? Next, please. How much do we take into account our visible and invisible environment in our designs? Next, please. So, because when we analyze environmental factors, natures, I mean, there are multitude of factors that is inherent in nature, like a seawater drop. When we look at the seawater drop under the microscope, we can find 10 million viruses. Next, please. Or when we analyze the human body, we can see that there are 30 trillion cells and 38 trillion bacteria. Next, please. So, in order architecture to evolve like living entities of nature, maybe we need new visions by considering the simultaneous understanding of multiple factors. Next, please. So we focused on always when this COVID phenomenon occurred, we focused on only adaptive reuse, space configurations, and changing the functions. But maybe from now on, we should focus on developing architecture, our architectural practice to improve the humanity, to improve the humanity's immunity systems, maybe to help their sustainable adaptation to nature. Maybe we can exemplify to focus on more things like buildings that do not pollute the air but filter the air back to the nature, or buildings that make photosynthesis in itself, or buildings that provide surfaces blocking the harmful viruses, buildings with what we mean was building that not only protects but also heal in itself. Next, please. So we would like to tell by the exemplifying the crown-sinus syndrome in forests. While the trees in this forest are distancing themselves in order to attain proper daylighting for survival together, we need to attain a multidisciplinary approach for combination of our scientific processes into architectural design processes, and shift from object-based architecture to the knowledge-based architecture. Next, please. So we mentioned this in this presentation about the paradox of architecture, which is architecture being in the situation between coexisting with nature and at the same time protecting itself from nature by isolating itself. So in order to approach this paradox, we need a change in the changes of our education systems producing architecture, because we believe that in 100 years of this pandemic experience of humanity, architecture could have made progress in its knowledge in order to be more prepared for today's situation. So we have to reconsider our ways of architectural thinking and producing in order to deal with this paradox in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, and receive our apologies for the little technical problems. So powerful ideas and great messages can inspire us no matter the form they are transmitted, whether via online meetings or face-to-face. Now we are preparing the first special moment for our guests and participants. And it is a call for futuristic visions towards architecture and the city during pandemic conditions, initiated and created by one of our Share Society members and respected architect Habibek Mashdabadi, the owner and principal architect of Habibek Mashdabadi Architecture Studio in Iran. This call is addressed to all of you, and you are invited to collaborate and share your ideas and your thoughts for this common manifesto.
As we all know, the world is changing. Changes that disrupt previous relationships and naturally change the future of city and architecture. Today, architects are facing some of these changes, and they are preparing themselves for the future. This is a pause that suddenly stops the war and attempts to disrupt many definitions. The emergency condition that has obliged billions of people to pass weeks or even months at home in quarantine conditions has changed our perception of time and space. I think it's time for architects to emerge in their historical role as thinkers and planners, as they have accepted previously this role at various stages through history. It is time to start theorizing the conditions of being and acting in the world future. In the current situation, the question of survival has become once again the first concern of mankind. The city and public space have lost their functions, and home have become a safe haven to protect mankind from external dangers. The house once again established its prehistorical function as a refuge. In Iran, houses has always been refuge, as we call it char divari. But today, the whole world is dramatically about staying at home. The main questions are, in case the current situation persists for a long time, how will people react to such unsecure world? How should be the settlements of the future? What impact these changes will have on public spaces, such as streets, squares, shopping malls, cinemas, and museums? How would be the dwelling of the future? Architecture as a safe haven for survival is not a new idea. Radical concept of archigram, hypothetical meta-projects of 1960s had similar motivations. Projects such as Walking City by Ron Harren and Living Pod by David Green. They can be seen as a response to the war's concerns during 1960s. Concerns about the Vietnam War, the Cold War, and the fear of atomic and chemical weapons, which made the issue of survival a public concern like it is today. I think one of the most important debates in today's architecture is how do architects play their historical role today? What is the vision of the future of the city and architecture? What is the mission of architects in this new era? In the current situation, many artists and architects have closed their offices and workshops for an undefined period of time. Today, we can individually participate in collective effort for developing fresh concepts and futuristic visions towards architecture and the city during pandemic conditions. I invite international architects and artists to share their ideas. I hope the synergy of the people who adhere to this movement will enrich our thoughts and vision about the future. This is also to invite all of us to share our hypothetical apocalyptic scenario caused by series of pandemic persisted over years. I'm talking to you from Tehran during quarantine days. Thank you.
We invite you all to answer Habibek Mashdabadi call, and please visit our website and please write to our email address and contribute to this common manifesto that will be part of this new editorial project that we are preparing. Now we are to the second part of our event, and we have the pleasure to introduce and welcome Mr. Cosmin Petroiu, the CEO of TerraSteel Romania, and Mr. Victor Stojanovski, the area sales manager from the Balkans region for Aluprof. Before we dive into the debate, I want to inform our participants to submit their questions to the architects because the Q&A session is next. So welcome, Mr. Cosmin Petroiu.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes,
hello.
We hear you very well. How has TerraSteel adapted to the current situation?
In the beginning, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, we start to be a little bit scared, both in Romania, also in Serbia, and of course we took all the measures necessary to protect, first of all, our people. And after a while, we noticed that we can work normally. Mainly all the salespeople and everybody who can work from home is working from home, and due to the fact that we invested quite a lot in the last period of time in digitalization of the company, we managed to keep all the processes working. I can say normally to 100%. Also, there were some issues, but now I can see that also the materials that we're buying from the Western European countries like Italy, Germany, or other parts, in the beginning there were some issues in delivery. But now things, from my point of view, they are working normally and we don't have delays. Yeah, but this crisis actually teach us something very interesting, because one of a part of the 4D concept of TerraSteel, which is digitalization, the determination, delocalization, we saw another phase of delocalization, because in our concept was to get close to the client, to get close to our customers in the different countries. But now we saw that we can work and we can do good stuff also from home. It's true that the sales process starts to be more difficult, but we focus mainly on the companies and clients that are working for the hospitals. So the companies that are doing the containers, they start to be much more active. And showing this, we thought also to make a concept for a very fast modular building, realized in 7-10 days altogether with assembly where is needed to some hospitals. So we are very optimistic, and we continue our development of products, and what you saw in the previous conferences in ShareX, the lead concept. And we are waiting to see what is happening in the future. So if you have questions for me, please feel free to write or to ask directly.
Yes, participants are invited to ask questions if they want. Thank you for your very interesting introduction. And so digitalization is the answer. It seems like it is the common answer for
From our
everyone.
point of view, 80% it's everything what we are doing in the company, 80% it's through software. So we can say that we are 80% digitalized company in this moment.
Thank you for your intervention. My colleague Milos will introduce Mr. Victor Stojanovski from Aluprof.
Hello to everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm really happy to have you here, Mr. Stojanovski. And I would like to ask you how does Aluproof helps architects to optimize their designs in this situation?
This is really good questions. Actually, our proof very well know what challenge you need to face to the architect during the design process. And we approaching to every project, no matter that is a big or smaller, very seriously. Generally, we have very strong technical support department where we support and advise architect in design and construction process. As well, they will provide some technical support in solving the problems on the site. We also have really good online catalogs for the architect, fully equipped with the technical drawing in the different format, like CAD, ArchiCAD, Review, 3D Max, and BIM models that help architects to use the right solution in their projects. But sometimes for the designing, for example, for the complex structure or very large surface, we need to require very individuated for the particular facility. For such needs, Aluproof develop bespoke solution to help architects to get with their project. That just show you some example for like residential building of the 125 Greenwich steel in New York, designed by architect Rafał Winoli, Menica Legacy Tower in Warsaw, Hotel Hilton in Kiev, and many more worldwide, where you can see on the online portfolio, to not losing time. Most significant and is just to mention that to the response to the changing models and architecture design and the industry requirement, Aluproof keep on the developing new improvement architectural aluminum system, meeting the needs for the high thermal isolation and the water tightness, impact resistance, and safety to use as well, design, flexibility, and contemporary looks. That is the case with the numerous building constructed using the Aluproof system, but prestige certification like BREEAM, LEED, and GREECH building. Product in this group as our label recommended for the energy efficient building. What additional and very specialized, what we also from the Aluproof side is, especially for designers, we offer special solutions in the fire resistance, smoke proof, and smoke resistant structures up to the EA 1920 classes. Using this product, the situation, we can trade the life and health, can be time more safety efficient, especially the changes to control the fire and resistant lots of cases with fires. This is the 3 or 4 divided options for our site, which will be different approach to our architects and supported with their designs.
Thank you very much. It seems that we're through a time that will restructure many of the areas in work, in practice, and in industry. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the field will keep on evolving, I'm sure.
Yes, all open question we are available to provide and to support every party at events.
Great, thank you. We will now carry on and we'll open the debate with our 3 speakers from the first part. Andrea, would you like to ask the first question or should I go first?
As you want.
Okay, then I'll start with a question for all 3 maybe. I think that it's always difficult, right, when you live, always difficult. It's the first time actually my generation lives through a time that everything seems to be restructured as we speak, radically, and not only radically, globally, at the same time everywhere. So I suppose the main thing that architects need to deal with and think of is how on earth to plan and to design for the unknown, for something that obviously will keep on changing. And in connection to that, maybe slightly provocative question of, if everything has changed, then definitely also what you did in the past, what you designed in the past, is not something that you would do now, or am I wrong? What's the element of your projects that you would design differently if you would know for the current crisis, for the current global COVID-19 crisis? Maybe Pepe first, but I'm really interested in hearing your input of all three of you.
I'm sorry that I was paying attention to the chat, that they were telling me to to be near the camera. But if I'm not under, if I miss, if I, you were talking that it's the first time that globally we have this pandemic all over the world, no? And the question is.
The question is that if everything has changed, that means, I suppose, for every single architect also that we can't go on designing as we used to. So that, I suppose, means also that we look in at our projects from the past and see things that we would do differently if we would know for the COVID-19 crisis. So, you know, it's an unusual, maybe a thankless question to ask architects, but I'm still interested in what is the thing that you would change with your projects, and have you known for the crisis coming?
But okay, yes, I will try to answer. Of course, anyone has an evolution during his life. Okay, I think that we are living in a society that everything goes really fast, and I think that now a crisis period like the period we have now is an excellent period to think and to understand that. Something is wrong in our lives, I think, and to I will try to answer your question as well, but it's a good time to think that we really have to change as society. Okay, so regarding my projects, maybe I will try to work with local materials. I will try, because I think that the problem is not the COVID-19 as of course it's a problem, but I want to come back again to the pollution, again to the nature, as Kerem, all the things that told as well Sven. For me, that's important. Try to also, in my opinion, save money in the meaning that sometimes architecture, that's my opinion and my point of view, should be as simple as possible, just to solve problems. Okay, problems. Architecture is for people, and I have to recognize that some of my projects, maybe nowadays, I will change something like choosing our materials, working with wood. I love wood, and I have a problem that I don't have so much projects done with wood. And also try to work more with the clients. I think that I'm completely agree with Sven. I think that this problem is we have to solve together, all together, the problem. Of course, we have politics, we have economical context, we have a lot of context, and they have more decisions than architects. But each change starts by one person, by individuals, and small things altogether can change. And yes, I agree. I will change several things of my projects, but mostly regarding with economical, with the cost, and regarding with materials. These days, I think it's a good news that suddenly, because everything is done in China. We here in Spain, we don't have factories now, you know. So when everything stops, you suddenly understand that everything comes from China, and there's a problem. And why don't we can? I'm not trying to go to the past, but I don't know if it's a lot of sense to produce in China and then take a plane or a ship and go back to Spain, and it's no sense in my way of things. There's no sense. Okay, so why don't you? Sorry.
It seems that this crisis, right, is interesting because one, it's radically global, so it's the same everywhere. But in a second sense, it's radically constrained within the walls of our homes. So it's both global and tiny at the same time, and I think that it's both of the extremes of the usual, the normal, as you said it. And thank you. It was really interesting to hear your insights on that. Maybe Kerem&Begum, do you have any insights about, you know, how the crisis changes what we used to do as normal? and what would you change if you'd known for what's coming?
We believe that we have to shift our focus to more scientific researches. Maybe we have to rethink our epistemological background, and we have to, define how the knowledge of nature that is inherent in its system of relations. So maybe we have to, how can I say, make research with scientists or some, and we have to redefine science and technology in order to integrate our architectural spaces. Because we were, since the modern times, maybe 100 years ago, we were always occupying with ourselves with space configurations, transformation of spaces, how functional changes occur. So space function or visual effects like transparency or, the aesthetics of architecture, how vision, how the facade is understood within its beauty and its idea of being an object. So maybe in the future we have to rethink these facades. The elements of architecture should be redefined, not only with in terms of space configurations or visual effects. So we have to maybe work with scientists or work with how can I say, psychologists or something, that has to have a progress in terms of research, about to understand what nature itself is, how they react to these conditions, how they communicate with each other, how organisms, because it was a research pursuit in the 1970s, but due to the need for very high funds, it is stopped in the 1980s, 90s. But now we have to rethink about this multidisciplinarity in scientific and knowledge researches. Mm-hmm. And my colleague.
And I like to add one little thing. For example, I'm thinking I like to learn more about the wind, about the trees, and be more specific. We always talk like this, like the word nature, green architecture. It's like more generalistic, let's say, approach. But in my opinion, in order to get more progress in architecture, we need to be more specific. We need to know which tree we are putting in the project, and what kind of wind is hitting into the facade. So we need to be more specific. What kind of green we are talking about. We need to be more knowledge-based. That's what we try to say. Otherwise, I mean, the education should also be changed. We always thought about space, about public space, for example. But I am not sure many of the architects know and let's say design according to the multiple factors. Like a human being, it's very complex, a human being body. But our buildings, do we think they are really complex in that manner? I think no. We need to be more specific, and we need to share knowledge more, like this COVID statistics. For example, today we know in which place what's happening. But can we talk the similar thing for architecture? To design a sports hall, for example. Do we know all the sports halls in the world like statistics done for COVID? No, but we can. We have this information, but we don't share. Maybe there will be more platforms, I believe, for sharing knowledge.
Thank you. I think that what's really important with what you said and you presented in your work is that it's not only enough to have wide knowledge, but also actually take the time to notice things. Because with nature, it doesn't help if you just know information if you don't have the time to see how the shadows and how the leaves are growing and so on. So I think this is sort of what I also got from your presentation. And it also links, at least in my mind, to what I want to ask Sven, which is linked to my original question, but it's a simple question. Does the crisis, and you said like it's never let the crisis go to waste, which I think is extremely useful advice, but it can go in two ways, right? Very often the crisis only makes things worse in the long run, so we don't have any guarantee that we will go in a better world from now on.
Yeah, that was my warning that I finished my lecture with. Like there's a lot of measures being taken now under the shadow of, okay, we need to confine the virus, etc. You see that Environmental Protection Agency in the United States is delivering laws which would be heavily opposed in normal days, and they just pass under the temporary effects of the crisis. Also, the what I said, the measures that would actually limit our privacy. We should definitely look out that it's. I mean, we're very proud in Western Europe that we are not confined or controlled like the public in China is. Although it proves to be very effective, but at what cost? So that's the balance that we all need to find. And if you said, well, coming back to the first question that you posed to Pepe and Kerem, like what would you do different? I guess that we did quite a good job in the past 25 years. Like also looking ahead, if you imagine the Expo Pavilion in Hanover, the stacked landscape, already integrated like a forest level and integrated a smart water system in the building. It's integrated different landscapes, different types of use in a landscape or in a building, which is something that I guess we might see a lot more often now. What we did miss, I guess, in the past is have a very close look at the life cycle of buildings. Like what kind of materials are being used, how could they be reused if the building is torn down in the end? How could it be recycled or reused in a different way? So that's all, of course you take care of it, but I guess the sign of the times is that we have to look a lot closer into that. And as Pepe mentioned, like timber as a construction material would be most definitely the choice to make now. So that's a bit the balance that you have to find, because we all know that high-rise is limited in timber construction, although there's ways to deal with that. But that's a bit the question of density that we are always promoting, and how to create density in a sort of this new construction materials. We also thought to ourselves, like we've been promoting density and diversity in urban living environments for the past 25 years. So now that you see where all the packed cities are heavily influenced, just look at New York City, by the corona outbreak. So where does it put density? But I guess there's a huge difference between crowdedness and density. It just would mean that we need to reconfigure public space, for example, that we need to reconfigure the living environment. Also a good example that Pepe showed, that you have 1,000 homes in one home. This multifunctional use of different buildings or of your own living space, that's something that will certainly pop up a lot more in our work.
Thank you. It seems that the question of density is a really interesting one, the distinction between crowdedness and density, because it's an interesting mix of of pros and cons that we're experiencing now. I think it's going to be the whole field is going to be rethought on that radically. Andrea, maybe?
Yes, this debate was incredibly relevant for today's situation. And we are eagerly waiting to see the questions coming from the public. But for the moment, we will go on to the next moment. It's also the last special moment that we have prepared for our guests. That will be a presentation made by Laurian Ghinitsoiu, who uses photography as an instrument to document the built environment. And his photographies achieved excellent results at international architecture photography competitions in the past 5 years. He recently won the overall winner and the 3 categories in the Architectural Photography Awards 2019. And his work is featured by major publishers like Fay, Domus, Tachen, El Croquis, and selected as covers for many influencing architectural magazines such as Arquitectura Record and so on. Through his collaborators, you can recognize big offices like OMA, Big Hattervik Studio. And after Laurian Ghinitsoiu, we will go on with the last part of our event, the Q&A session. And we are kindly inviting again our participants to submit their questions to the speakers as follow. Type video followed by question if you would like to address the question live. And type moderator followed by question if you would like to moderators to address the question for you. So now, welcome, Laurian.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We are very enchanted to have you here.
Okay, I think I got it. Since the pandemic started, we started to count everything in days, mostly, and I tried to make a very short CV, which is counting everything in days, more or less. But what I want to point out is the fact that the moment when I switched from architecture to photography was 1,810 days ago. But what I realized only 13 days ago when I was laughing with some friends on Zoom was the fact that actually that means that my photography or the way I do photography, it's more or less social distancing. And we started to think about, and I started to think more about all this new vocabulary that we are bombed these days, which I thought it was quite interesting to put it in this kind of presentation in this kind of moment. And I will start with these words of quarantine and social distancing and lockdown and high risk and that. Quarantine, it's more or less about people isolation, and I've been in a few places around the world which deal with that. The first one, it's Tempelhof in Berlin, which is considered one of the symbol of freedom of the city. And what happened in 2015 was all these hangars in the back were started to be used as a refugee shelter, and around 2,000 refugees were there for a few years, and it was very strict moment for them in the way they went out of the city and the time they had to come back inside. Another example, it's the jungle, which is was in Calais, which is the northest point in France, in connection with UK through the Eurotunnel, and around 10,000 refugees from all over they crossed Europe. They had to stop here because they just couldn't cross towards England. And they created this refugee camp, unofficial, which was dismantled after a year. And you have all this function that they created, like this is a a nightclub and churches and mosques and hospitals and restaurants and so on, schools. Another example, it's in Manila. It's the North Cemetery, which where the people that were taking care of the mausoleums 50, 60 years ago, they started to move in and grow the family there. And in this photo, you have already like the 3 generations that they are living inside this cemetery. And what I found it fascinating was the fact that all these, most of the people, they were saying that they feel actually very safe inside this, the borders of the cemetery, because outside the other option for them was to live in a slum where it's actually very dangerous. And here is the school. Here they were playing bingo and so on. So all this became a community, and they created all these kind of public spaces, common spaces. Social distancing, it's the physical distancing. And since everything started, I think we started to complain about our, I don't know, 20, 30, 50 square meters there where we have to stay. But there are places in the world where people don't have in general the possibility to choose. And one of them, it's Dharavi, where the density of the place, it's more or less 1 million people in 2 square kilometers, which is more or less 2 square meters per capita, including the streets and the public space. It's a very nice, very interesting place because it also has a informal economy of $1 billion per year, and they have textiles and leather and recycling and so on. Another example, it goes a bit slow, the presentation. Another example, it's Shipai in Guangzhou. Yeah, Shipai, it's one of the latest urban villages in Guangzhou. And it has around 170 alleys. But what I think it's interesting about it is that actually the light doesn't go through the level of the street. So it creates all these dark alleys. Those all are photos taken during the day. And they call these buildings handshake building, because you can literally shake the hands in between windows or balconies. I related the lockdown with a moment of dystopia, and because we see all these empty streets. And the first example, it's in Fukushima that I photographed more or less a year ago. It's the city of Nami, which was closed 9 years ago after the nuclear disaster in Japan. And a year ago was open, so I could go and photograph it, but you still cannot see any person on the street, and you just have to wait till the night, and maybe you can find some lights in some housing. Another example, it's in Iran. It's called Pardi City. It's a development by the government, but it's still not livable because they didn't create any infrastructure and any other function. What was interesting about this place is that I photographed it during the internet lockdown in November when the protest started. So I had to go through all the city to Tehran without a map, without Google Maps, without access to internet. Another project, another place it's in 2 seconds, I think I lost. No. It's in Turkey, which is called, I cannot move anymore, or I can. Yeah, it's in Turkey, where there are 500 castles, French castles, which were built by independent developer, which became unusable because nobody wanted actually to buy any house there. And we know that the higher risk it's always the lower class, and I've always been interested in this contrast between the social classes. And one of the examples that I found, it's in Milan. The Prada Foundation is, as you may know, is designed by OMA and Rem Koolhaas, and it literally has gold on this building, 24 carats gold. This was taken during the opening of the museum, and the elite, of course, it's here to see the last contemporary art. But across the street, across the train tracks, there are people from Africa living, and they are facing daily this gold facade of Prada, and probably some of them are even selling this fake Prada's bags in Milan. Another example, it's in Beirut that it's the Yabani. It's a restaurant, a sushi restaurant designed in early 2000 by Bernard Coury, which decided to put it underground in order to turn the back to the surroundings, which were where there were refugees living and squatters. So now, after several years, the restaurant was closed, and 3 families of refugees are living inside this sushi restaurant, which I found it very interesting as a. And there are a few more moments, the death toll and the casualties that I found in several places around the world. One is the earthquake in Hualien, in Taiwan, which happened a year ago. And of course, we all know the results of the terrorist attack and this memorial light that is always turns on every year. The Kosovo War, where they keep this building as a memorial to the war. And this is a photo that I took a few days ago on the east coast of Japan, where the tsunami hit 9 years ago. And my point about it is that we already seen all these moments before, and we didn't react it yet. So maybe now that it became even harder, maybe it's a new start. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauriana, for this journey through images. Welcome back. We will go on with our latest part of today's event and the Q&A session. We have received several questions for our guests. So me and Milos will read some of them, and those of you who would like to address the question live and turn on their video can do this by raising their hand. I will read the question answered by Carlos Cerquera. He says, hi, thanks for this webinar. It's amazing. I want to know, what do you think about how to transform old buildings for the post-pandemic future? This question is addressed to all of our guests, so anyone can answer.
So the question was how to transform our buildings.
Yeah, old buildings for this post-pandemic future.
Well, we will certainly, as I mentioned in the lecture, we will certainly be confronted with limitations in existing architecture. You can see that in your own office. We used to have, or we have, 200 plus people in the office that were like stacked next to each other. once we have the liberty to actually go back to the office to work there, it will have a different look. We have a huge dining table where we have lunch together. I can only imagine that 1/3 of the people will fit there if you have to keep a distance of 1.5 meters. That means that, of course, there will be limitations, there will be changes in the way that we use buildings, that we go to work, that we do live together, that we go to a bar and have a beer or wine. Events is probably something that's going to be very hard to organize. So it's not something that will end like in 5 months time. I guess it's going to affect our way of living, working, living, playing, being together, socializing for the next couple of years.
Yes, we will have to learn how to live with these social distancing norms, actually.
Definitely.
And yes, and this is very interesting how the social distancing to be put in relation to the closeness mediated by technology. You know, that's a paradox here, that we rely on technology now, as we were thinking like architecture is bringing people together. So now architecture has to find a new way of speaking to its users.
Yeah, indeed. I think that it's a question of how to communicate. It's how to communicate with new sort of architecture. It's also in the inherent in the second question that I have here, and I'll read it out. It's a question by Thomas Lehnert, and it's supposed to address all of the speakers, but whoever wants to answer it first, it goes like this. Is the right way to transform the architecture in the sense in which we're talking today through simplicity, and I think he means with that natural materials, simple construction systems, or through complexity? So high-tech construction and materials. And is high-tech really the right answer, considering that complex systems are in themselves not as sustainable as one would imagine, taking into account the materials, production, transport, etc. So is simplicity or complexity the right way to go, to put it very simply? Is there anyone who would like, Pepe? Yeah, please.
Yeah. I think that both. I think that we have to be, I think that architects are creative, that's for sure. And I think that innovation means, in my opinion, is to take things from our tradition and also incorporate things of technology. So, for instance, I came from Spain. Here we have a very interesting Mediterranean construction heritage. And we can build in, for instance, imagine a building, okay, we have active systems for energy efficiency and passive systems. So why not passive systems like materials, everything can be from our tradition, and of course mixing with technology, why not? And also we can mix technology, why not? I think that both systems are good. What I told before about simplicity means in terms, because for me, sustainability, it's also, it has a layer that is also the economical layer, okay? So sometimes I think it's interesting to save energy and at the same time to save money. And at the end, architecture is, I think that we have to focus on people, on a person, because architecture is for that. And that was the context of my word of simplicity was on that way. But I think that the answer is, in my opinion, is mixing both.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Milos, I like to add something if we have.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think for the previous question, I would like to say that the spaces will be transformed with some new standards. It should be, in my opinion. because we couldn't present very well because of the technical problem from our side. But I think we didn't learn enough from Spanish flu. It's 100 years past, and we are not prepared, you know, to transform the spaces. We just do with quick decisions, just to empty the space and put some beds and some separations. So maybe first we need to regulate some new, I think, ideas beforehand. While we are designing an ice rink, for example. We design an ice rink with a multi-purpose, let's say, possibilities to transform into a basketball hall. But beforehand, we can also think this space like to be transformed into a hospital in, let's say, in 2 hours, in 3 hours, for example. Because we, in our standards, we calculate the fire escape, for example. In one of our projects, in 2 minutes, 10,000 people can exit the space. So why don't we think the reverse? In let's say 2 hours, an ice rink hall can return properly, okay? Not like today, because these spaces also may be not healthy today. They are people are maybe they need to do this, okay? But as architects, we can think this beforehand. Yeah, thank you.
Is it something that you were also talking in your talk about adaptive reuse and maybe also almost post functionality, right? I mean that it's the building is not just for one function, but that you need to take into account that it's many lives in the future that you can't predict. I thought that was really fascinating.
We had a comment from our participants who said that Miha Dobrin said that in his opinion, there is a room for improvement for all of us. We all, the architects and all humans, we need to become sensitive for the true needs in our lives. And our very specific professional responsibility is also to limit the clients in their hunger, in their overt hunger clients. This is a view from one of our participants.
Would you care to comment?
Yeah, we also have a question for you, Olivera. You can read it.
Sorry, this is in.
Yes, I will.
In the open section.
Yes, of course.
Ah, yeah, I see it. Yeah. Okay, so Olivera Simoskanaka first says, thanks for the great presentations we've heard these days. Reviewing all the knowledge we have for the architecture and its social meaning, I got to a point of a dilemma referring to post-pandemic architecture development. Asking myself and all of us, should we as architects promote eco-friendly spatial solution assembled by natural materials as the ancient masters, or should we continue in the digital era of high-tech architecture made of virtual holographic materials with remote controls by a few buttons on our keychain? It's a slightly similar question to the one we had before. It seems that there is actually a burning question present with many architects and many participants, how this diversion will go on, so high-tech or low-tech. But and I know that Pepe, you already answered this and said that both is the way. Do you have do the other speakers have views on this, or maybe on this new angle of this question? Maybe Sven?
I guess you could have the discussion about building technology, building materials, whether those are complex, whether those are simple. I guess if you take the range a bit wider and you ask yourself, what are we designing for? It's always people, it's always the use. Every building has a function, and it has a group of users, bigger, smaller, that needs to make use of it. Those are all individuals that are living in these environments, working in these environments. And all those individuals, they have a common factor, but they also have a very personal and individual factor. That means that all the buildings and everything that we are designing for has a natural complexity in it, because it seems very easy at this time, lock everybody in its own space, and we get rid of all the problems. Air pollution, traffic congestion, murder rates are going down, there's no burglaries anymore. So come on, lock everybody inside and we're rid of all the problems, which is simplifying the society. We have a lot of individuals in this society. They want to live together. In this video that was shown in the meantime, it says like home is a refuge. But I guess that if this takes 2 weeks longer, and in Spain it's already, Spain and Italy are more severe than the Netherlands, it will not feel as a refuge but as a prison. So you have the urge to go out, you have the urge to meet with other people in person, which makes it complex, of course. And I guess we need to design for this complexity of society. We need to design for a society which has limitations, but also allows for what people are naturally looking for, which is social interaction. That could be done. So there's another level of complexity or simplicity than confined to the building. But I guess that's the bigger question that we should.
Yes, actually the social complexity of the architectural problem, in fact.
True.
Yes, we have a question from Eric Stojanovic. He asks, contemporary architecture is made of glass, aluminium, concrete, but all those materials have negative environmental effect. The change in the way architecture is promoted should shift from high to low energy materials. Will the post-virus architecture change our relation with nature? Which leads me to refine this question, to the question how to use this virus-induced situation to build up a momentum for social ecological transformation.
I guess that's exactly what Pepe was saying, and what I mentioned in my lecture. Never waste a good crisis. And I've seen this this morning in newspapers, 7 newspapers, that the European Parliament actually wants to, after this the economical lockdown of Europe is softened, we definitely need to focus on the circular economy and the green economy. So you already see signs that not only us or a couple of believers or a few Greenpeace activists are thinking about changing the pace, but it's also happening in the European Parliament and the different governments in different cities and nations.
Yes, so everyone is concerned about the same topics.
I guess everybody sees the opportunity, because nobody believed that we could hop off that riding train. Sorry, we cannot get rid of flights because we need to travel all the way. And now we suddenly realize that a Zoom conference is perfectly feasible. So by being forced to look for other solutions and to look for different ways, we actually realize that it can be done. And that's somehow encouraging.
Let's hope so, indeed. Yeah, I think that this duality of encouragement as well as fears is present also in the last question that we posed. It's posed by Polona Filipic, and she first says, thanks for all the presentations, and then offers her insight about density. Talking nowadays about density is almost a crime. So is this again a period that will somehow push for the development of suburbia? The ownership of the suburban individual house will again become a dream living model aiming for the dispersed urban development. So what's your views on this? It's a conceivable either danger or opportunity. Again, it's a double-edged sword. I don't doubt. What do you think? Are we going to see a return of suburbia where you can self-isolate in a sustainable way whenever you wish?
Or if there is urbanism a pandemic problem?
Indeed.
Urbanism is a now pandemic problem. I think in the future, nobody wants to live in this, how can I say, very big skyscrapers in which people use elevators very frequently. So there will be a change in the economical or capitalist systems and the needs of people. They will, I think all of the world will be suburbia, because everybody will want to live in villages, you know, and everybody will turn their heads to their own families, and so all these shopping centers and, you know, multifunctional residential units will go away. So there won't be any need for all the offices will buy. All the office owners will buy a plot for themselves, which they can erect one building for their own employees. So the understanding of architecture will totally change in the future. So all the world will turn into the world in which Lorian exemplified, because everybody, you know, while self-isolating, they will understand that there's not a way like that. So this self-isolation becomes again will be embedded with crowdedness, in which all the plots of land will be used, and which everybody consume more and more, going to markets and stocking their, you know, toilet papers and, you know, and living with their village neighbors like that. So so we have to shift, maybe we have to focus on this like technological Zoom like maybe applications in which people dialogue with each other and improve their way of understanding that humanity itself is the problem, you know. So maybe education will develop this way. So like that.
I think the world will become more horizontal. I agree with Begum, and also more abstract for some reasons, like now. Okay, I see your face, but you are not here. Okay, so but at the same time, we will also rediscover the brick. It will be a new Blade Runner situation. I think everything's all together: the technology, the brick, but with more horizontality. Until I think we will find some, let's say, new maybe solutions that are more attractive, like maybe flying buildings, kind of different approaches to go higher. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. Yeah, we thought it was the last question, but really the last one. We would address a question to Laurian. And someone asked, what do you think as a photographer is the biggest problem of architecture in the way of preventing or reshaping the post-pandemic world? And for others, there will be always parts of the world deprived of architectural help, considering high-tech use of materials, meaning slums, poorer areas all over the world. How do you think architecture can help preventing environmental crises such as COVID pandemic there? So Laurian can give the first answer, and anyone who would like to address the rest of the question.
I'm not sure how to answer it.
What have you seen during your journeys all around the world to photograph situation?
I think as architects, we don't look too much in the context. And when I'm saying context, of course, is the physical context, but at the same time, it's the economical one, or the political one, or all these other layers that we fail, I think, to address. And yeah, I think that's what I have in mind, the context with all the layers.
I'd like to add something, Andrea, may I?
Go ahead.
Hello. Yes, I think the COVID issue is not a medical issue, in my opinion. It will not be a medical issue in the future. Like Florian said, social parts, different parts will also be included into the scenario. But for architecture, I think the buildings may help by integrating into the system more, into the nature more, by transforming the buildings not only spatially but also maybe like a tree, you know, like a plant. If we can imagine a building like a plant to help for let's say for producing something helpful for the world, you know, not only consuming. So the building itself can be a healing space. Maybe the COVID issue is not only a medical issue to solve. Otherwise, if we find this solution to this COVID medically, then we might return back to our life again, the similar lives. Then we will face the same thing in 100 years later.
Pepe, yeah.
Can I add one?
Sure.
Yeah, regarding the slum, I mean, nowadays in our planet lives 7.5 thousand million, I think, and more or less 1,000 million people lives in slums. So regarding COVID-19, people, our doctors are telling us we should wash our hands several times by day. So how can architects can help these people? It's impossible. They don't have water. I mean, sometimes, I mean, I told about equality. Sven also told about equality. I think that we should have solutions in a global way. And nowadays, our countries are fighting against each other for who can buy face masks and COVID-19 test. And people is paying more money in order to get masks for one country. I mean, this should be globally. So how can architects can help? I mean, everyone as individuals, we can help, but when we are talking about the slums, there's a lot of poor people in the world that they don't have water. And all these slums, big part of them are located in rivers. I mean, not rivers, I mean in valleys that with any natural disasters, they are the first population they will die. So I think that I don't know how to do it, but we must. I'm sorry, but I come back again to my final presentation. We must think about our civilization, because I think that now we're really worried about all the people who is dying day by day by COVID-19, but every year a lot of children, a lot of people is dying because they don't have any food, or because, I don't know, any disease like Ebola, like AIDS in Africa, everything. So and I don't want to be pessimistic, but what can we architects can do in Islam? I don't know. Maybe try to give water and try to give not a metallic roof in very hot countries. I don't know. Small things, a small school. I don't know. It's really difficult, in my opinion. That's my opinion. I'm sorry, because I don't want to be so pessimist finishing that event. No, but I don't know what your opinion. I don't know what's your opinion.
I think it's wise to be pessimistic to start with. If you're pessimistic at the start, then you might make real changes and end up with a better world. If you start up optimistically, then you'll just you know, carry on as normal, and that would be quite bad in the long run.
I would argue with that. You know, Norman Foster said that architects are optimistic by nature. So,
but it depends whether they're optimistic about their own projects or about the effect that their projects have on society.
Upon their vision, upon their visions on the world. So we are getting very close to the final of this session. We would like very much to thank to our guest speakers and our participants. And I would like to remind you that this talk and this discussion will be part of an editorial project that we are preparing. That will be the second book that we are going to launch, having this title, Transforming the World Through Architecture, that continues the first editorial project, Designing the Profile of the Future Architects. So we want to be sure that these ideas will have an impact and can reach as many people as possible. Thank you, everyone. Milos, if you'd like to add something as a conclusion.
Thank you. It was great fun to talk this thing with all of you. Thank you so much. I think it's quite clear that this is hardly the end, but only a start of discussion, both in this setup and generally for architects and for the whole global discourse. So I think that we should really start thinking about how to change things. It's not going to be easy. And I'm looking forward to continuing these discussions. Thanks so much. And we ask all the participants to stay online for a couple of minutes when the conference finishes, so that they can, if you can, to take a short survey to let us know how did you find the conference. And looking forward to seeing you in Ljubljana and other places.
We are still on. As our colleagues told us that we have received a poem, so they request to read it. As a conclusion, what do you say? Milos, can you read it?
Yeah.
Let's read it.
Let's read it. This is from Ivo Abram, right? Right.
Ivo Abram, yes. Yeah. Let's finish with his poem.
Okay, we'll finish with the poem. Thought. Every human being is half the world. Without him, the world does not exist. Man without the world also does not exist. When one is aware of this, he will change his habits. This is a poem by Ivo Abram to wrap up today's event and to give us some food for thought. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Milos. Thank you to our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.